Jess faces bullying from classmates every day at school, even being humiliated by being thrown bread. And every time, Jess just endures silently. During class, Scott constantly makes noises to harass Jess. The teacher also always scolds Jess without asking why, immediately reprimanding him. Clearly, Scott is the one causing trouble, but Jess has to accept the teacher's criticism. Scott also discovered Jess wearing a pair of women's shoes, so he mocked Jess. The reason Jess wears women's shoes is due to a secret hardship. Jess lives in a poor family, with 7 members struggling to make ends meet. Even though his only sneakers are tattered, Jess can only tape them up and keep wearing them. However, one morning, Jess's sneakers are missing. It turns out Jess's mother threw them away without permission. That afternoon, Jess has a very important race, and Jess's mother calmly says she will prepare a new pair of shoes for him. But the so-called new shoes are just his sister's old shoes. Jess's father thought his son should have a new pair of shoes, but was quietly told by his wife, due to financial difficulties, we can't buy Jess new shoes. The father could only give up, and a helpless Jess had to compromise. To hide that the shoes are women's, Jess specifically used a marker to black out the pink on the shoes. Although Jess tried to cover the shoes with black to hide them, classmates noticed and mocked him for it. At this moment, a new transfer student, Leslie, suddenly appeared and interrupted everything. And Jess's fate is about to change because of Leslie. Perhaps out of nervousness, as soon as Leslie entered the classroom, her backpack's contents spilled all over the floor. This caused everyone present to laugh, except Jess, who looked at her with a sad and sympathetic gaze. Because Jess felt that soon, Leslie would become a target of bullying just like himself. Sure enough, during recess, Leslie wanted to go to the bathroom but was stopped at the door by Avery, who demanded $1 for entry. Leslie was unafraid. She stared at Avery's big feet and told her a story about a Bigfoot who was mutilated and had his toes cut off for doing evil. This confused Avery. While Avery was distracted, Leslie tried to squeeze in but was stopped by Avery and had to give up. In the afternoon, the school's running race was about to start. This sport, usually only for boys, Leslie also actively participated in. Scott warned Leslie, stay away from the boys' race. Unexpectedly, Jess, usually timid, now challenged Scott. Was he afraid of losing to girls? Scott obviously didn't want to admit it and could only give up. When the race officially started, everyone began to run desperately, although Jess was wearing a pair of ill-fitting shoes. In order to win the game and earn a bit of respect among classmates, he trained every morning during the summer vacation. At this moment, Jess was doing his best and ran to the first place. However, just as he was immersed in the joy of victory, Leslie suddenly overtook Jess. In the end, Jess regrettably finished in second place. After the race, Jess collapsed on the ground. Perhaps to thank Jess for standing up for her earlier, Leslie extended her hand to him kindly. Perhaps feeling hurt in her pride, Jess did not accept Leslie's gesture and turned away directly. But just after Jess got off the bus after school, he found that Leslie had also followed. Jess thought she was stalking him, but in fact, Leslie was his new neighbor. Jess didn't take this matter seriously and continued to immerse himself in his sketchbook every day, which recorded his wild imagination. This was Jess's only way to heal himself. His naive sister Erin sometimes damaged Jess's sketchbook, and whenever Jess argued with Erin's, his father would always scold Jess without reason. At night, his father would gently give Erin's a goodnight kiss. However, when it was Jess's turn, his father simply ordered him to turn off the lights and go to sleep. At home, the older sisters could always argue over the TV, and the parents could sit leisurely at the table chatting, with the father always being extremely close to the sisters and the younger sister, while Jess could only hide in the corner of the sofa, silently observing everything around him as if he were an outsider. Jess didn't understand why he couldn't get his parents' love. Fortunately, at school, there was something he liked: music class. Because the music teacher was exceptionally gentle and beautiful, with light blue eyes like the ocean waves, just one glance from her could soothe Jess's restless heart. That day, Leslie, passing by Jess, noticed his thoughts and suggested Jess take a photo of the music teacher so he could look at it any time. Leslie's words instantly made Jess's cheeks flush. Jess wondered secretly why this new girl always paid such attention to him. After school in the afternoon, Jess, who was focused on drawing, caught Leslie's attention. Unexpectedly, Jess quickly closed his sketchbook when he sensed her, but was easily disarmed by the chewing gum Leslie offered. The next day, Jess took the initiative to share his sketchbook with Leslie, who praised it highly. Although Jess appeared calm on the surface, he was already overjoyed inside because this was the first time he received praise. Later in class, Jess also saw Leslie's excellence. According to the teacher's request, Leslie read her own essay about diving, and her poetic and beautiful words instantly captivated Jess. Seeing the admiring expressions of the students, the teacher said that there was a diving show tonight, and hoped everyone would watch it at home and then write a reflection. However, Leslie asked, "What if there is no TV at home?" Leslie's words made the classmates burst into laughter. After school, the classmates called Leslie over. She originally thought she had made new friends, but in fact, they just wanted to mock Leslie for not having a TV at home. Leslie, feeling disappointed, got on the school bus, unaware that she had sat on Avery's seat. That moment, Avery arrived. Jess quickly called Leslie away, successfully avoiding a disaster. After getting off the bus, the two did not go straight home, but decided to race each other to see who was faster. Thus, they ran into a dense forest. Jess was very curious about Leslie's diving experience. Unexpectedly, Leslie said she didn't know how to dive at all. It turned out that all those vivid descriptions were fabricated by Leslie. Soon, the two arrived at a small creek. Seeing the rope hanging above the creek, Leslie grabbed the rope and swung freely in the air. Curious, Jess also joined in, and at that moment, the two seemed to find the feeling of flying. However, they wanted more excitement. So Leslie proposed to find a magical kingdom. Reaching this step is actually not difficult. Just need to use your imagination boldly. For example, the rope they're imagining now is a magical instrument leading to the magical kingdom. After saying that, Leslie immediately grabbed the rope, swung to the other side of the creek, and disappeared. Seeing this, Jess quickly grabbed the rope and swung across the stream with great effort, but Leslie's figure was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, the surrounding trees seemed to come alive, and the strange sounds coming from them made Jess feel frightened. Jess picked up a stick, but was startled by Leslie hiding behind a tree. Then Leslie led Jess deeper into the forest, where an old car came into view. Leslie said she was very sorry. They almost reached the magical kingdom. Suddenly, a metallic knocking sound came from behind. Leslie said it was the sound of prisoners' chains, and the dark wizard was nearby. Overcome with fear, Jess wanted to escape immediately. At this moment, Leslie discovered an abandoned wooden house. The two climbed up using the rope, and this was exactly the place they had been searching for, an exclusive place for them. The dragonfly in front of them was described by Leslie as a brave warrior on the treetops. The dilapidated wooden house was called a fortress relic, and they were sent to rescue those imprisoned in darkness. With Leslie's shouts, a strong wind began to blow around them, as if the magical kingdom had sensed their arrival, although Jess knew all this was fake. After returning home, a change occurred deep inside him. Now Jess has become a hero who rescues all beings. Since then, they have been coming here every day after school to gather supplies and repair the dilapidated fortress. Time slowly passed, and the fortress renovation work was nearing completion, with the broken treehouse gradually becoming sturdy. On this day at school, they saw the music teacher struggling to carry a large pile of items. Leslie encouraged Jess to go forward and help, but Jess hesitated because of the two boys who always bullied him and did nothing. In the car, Avery deliberately fell when passing by Jess, then lied that Jess pushed him down. Eventually, Jess was forced off the car by the driver without reason, and he could only walk home alone. When Jess arrived at the station at the door, he found that Leslie was also splattered with tomato sauce by Avery. To prevent his mother at home from worrying, Leslie came to Jess's house to clean the stains off. Finally, they once again arrived at the secret base. During a chat, Jess learned that Leslie's parents are both writers. No wonder Leslie's imagination is so rich. She must have been influenced by her parents. However, Leslie believed it had nothing to do with her parents because everyone is unique, just like Jess's father is a driver, but Jess still knows nothing about driving. At this moment, they were suddenly attacked. It turned out to be a small squirrel causing trouble behind the scenes. Leslie fantasized that the squirrel monster was Scott and the Dark Lord's subordinate. To drive away the squirrel monster, they collected pine cones from the ground as grenades. The vulture monster was circling in the sky, looking for an opportunity. Soon, the squirrel monster appeared, making sounds like Scott and lunging at Jess. Jess delivered a hook punch, directly knocking the squirrel monster away. Here, it seemed that they all gained superpowers. Not only did they run very fast, but even climbing trees became very easy. After a while, they reached the top of a big tree, looking into the distance. Leslie saw a dreamy fairyland, but Jess saw a normal scene. Leslie told him to close his eyes and use his imagination. When Jess opened his eyes again, he indeed saw the scene Leslie described, even more colorful and vibrant. They called this Fairyland Terabithia, where Jess and Leslie had a lot of fun. However, Jess still felt unhappy at home. On Jess's birthday, his father only perfunctorily gave him a cheap toy. At this moment, Aaron hurriedly ran into the house. It turned out that the father's garden was destroyed by small animals. Angry, the father set traps, intending to make these uninvited guests pay a painful price. Jess helped patch the holes in the garden, hoping to do more to help. After all, today was his birthday, and he wanted some attention from his father. However, Jess received no positive response from his father and could only leave feeling disappointed. The next day, Jess looked gloomy on the school bus. Unexpectedly, Leslie gave Jess expensive painting tools as a birthday gift. Compared to his father's indifference, this gift touched Jess's heart even more. Encouraged by Leslie, Jess began to ignore the attitude of bullies, and when encountering music teachers in need of help, he would step forward directly to offer the greatest assistance. After school that day, Jess took the brushes and paints Leslie had given him and started decorating their fortress. A large tree that suddenly fell and hit the fortress was seen as a warning from the Dark Wizard. Learning that the squirrel monster and the bald eagle couldn't scare them away, the Dark Wizard sent a giant troll tree again. The huge footprints behind the fortress confirmed Leslie's suspicion. Faced with such situations, they were not afraid because, in their imaginary world, they were all-powerful beings. Early the next morning, Jess heard strange noises coming from the garden. It turned out that some small animals had unfortunately fallen into a trap. Kind-hearted Jess, while his family was still asleep, secretly released the small animals back into the forest. Unexpectedly, Jess was caught by his father on the way back, and as a result, Jess was scolded by his father. Jess suddenly felt that everything in this world was terrible. Even Leslie's fantasy of the giant troll tree lost its interest. Jess thought that those were just unrealistic fantasies and could not change the reality in the slightest. Even when Aaron was bullied by Avery, Jess didn't think of seeking justice for Aaron. Jess just silently turned away with Aaron, because if he went to fight Avery, he would definitely face severe punishment from the school. Leslie could only comfort Aaron. One day, we will strike back. However, Jess still felt it was impossible. At this moment, an advertisement for adopting a puppy appeared, changing Jess's mind. That evening, when Jess calmed down, he clearly realized that Leslie was right. The next day, Jess handed Leslie a painting, which was a picture of the giant troll hunting from today onward. After school, Leslie eagerly went to Terabithia, where Jess had prepared a surprise for her. Jess gave her the puppy. Thus, their team grew larger, and the puppy fantasized about becoming a troll hunter. Led by the hunter, they easily found the troll, whose big feet suddenly emerged from the ground, and the two had to flee in a panic. In their view, the troll had no weaknesses. However, the hunter easily found the troll's weakness, and thus the little hunter defeated the ticklish troll. The two also began to think about Avery's weakness. Soon, Leslie came up with a plan. They wrote Avery a love letter, signed with the name of the most handsome boy in school, and secretly placed it inside Avery's textbook. Everything went according to their plan. After school, Avery proactively approached that boy, but he did not pay attention to Avery. Everyone in the car saw the situation clearly, and Avery, feeling humiliated, suddenly lost her usual arrogance. This also gave Aaron's great satisfaction. After school, Leslie invited Jess to her house to help paint the walls together. Here, Jess was praised by elders for the first time. Jess realized that Leslie's parents were completely different from his own. Leslie's parents were always full of enthusiasm, and their family of 3 was so happy, which also caused a slight change in Jess's heart. Jess realized that a normal family relationship should be like this. At home, his father's attitude was indifferent, and as usual, he asked Jess to do chores around the house. For the first time, Jess argued with his father, which left his father puzzled. That day, Scott deliberately teased Jess again, which also made the music teacher notice Jess's strengths, praise him, and made Jess so happy he was overjoyed. However, some are happy while others are sad. Although the school toilets are now free to use, Avery was crying inside. Encouraged by Jess, Leslie decided to talk to Avery, but in the end, she had to wait until she went to Terabithia to discuss further. On the way home, Jess found that Avery's throne was gone, and Avery sat alone in the front row for the first time, looking lonely. When the two arrived at the secret base, Jess learned that Avery's father was abusive at home. Older students knew about it, and Leslie comforted her by mentioning how her family had been mocked for not having a TV, which led to Avery's honesty. At that moment, a sudden heavy rain forced the two to part ways and go home. However, Leslie, still eager, wanted to continue playing with Jess over the weekend, but Jess refused. It turned out that weekends were when Jess and his family went to church to pray. Leslie, who had never been to church before, was curious, so Jess took her along. When a beam of light shone through the glass, Leslie hurriedly caught it with her pocket, thinking it was a weapon against monsters. If only there was a church bell like that exorcism bell, she could easily defeat monsters. This made Jess look forward to the next adventure with anticipation. However, when Jess returned home, everything was back to normal. His father handed him the keys and asked him to help get the electric drill. The next morning, Jess was awakened by his father, realizing he had forgotten to return the keys. Jess searched repeatedly in the flower house, but couldn't find them. His father started complaining because the keys to his work were also among them. Losing them would mean changing the locks and deducting his salary. This made Jess very frustrated. Until he went to school, Jess found out that the keys had been taken by Aaron's. She wanted to surprise Jess by leaving the keys in Terabithia to make a holy exorcism bell. After school, the two hurried to the secret base. Due to continuous heavy rain for several days, the water level of the creek has been rising higher and higher, but Leslie remains fearless, just arrived at the base. A group of pursuers immediately appeared behind him. After a fierce battle, they successfully defeated all the squirrel monsters, but before they could celebrate, a more ferocious bald eagle monster chased after them. They used pine cones as hand grenades, but with little effect. When they reached the castle, they used holy light to shine on the exorcism bell, successfully summoning a large swarm of these spirits. The squirrel monsters and bald eagle instantly lost their threat. Jess climbed to the top of the castle to retrieve the key, but was ambushed by a sneaky bald eagle, causing Jess to fall from a height. Just as Jess was about to crash to the ground, a giant hand caught him, revealing that the giant troll had also become their ally. When they looked back, they realized that the giant troll was actually Avery, and so Jess took back the key dot on the way back. Heavy rain started to fall, and the two said goodbye to each other reluctantly, but no one expected that this would be their last farewell. When Jess silently placed the key in front of his father sensed something unusual. The next day, the music teacher unexpectedly called and invited Jess to visit the city museum. Jess hurried downstairs to ask his mother, who was resting, and she softly agreed. Thus, he got into the music teacher's car before leaving. He looked towards Leslie's house, but had no intention of inviting Leslie to join him. After all, he didn't want anyone to disturb their private time. Unexpectedly, this farewell turned out to be forever. Led by the music teacher, Jess visited the museum for the first time. The outside world filled Jess with curiosity. However, when he returned home, his mother was unusually concerned about him, having not heard Jess's request and thinking Jess had also encountered trouble. Confused, Jess learned from his family that today Leslie had drowned while trying to cross the creek with a rope. Unwilling to believe it, Jess hurried to Leslie's house. Seeing the police cars, he finally believed it was true. Jess quickly ran back to his room, closed the door, and opened his album to Leslie's page, remaining silent for a long time. The next day, Jess's parents came to express their condolences. Leslie's father hugged Jess tightly and said, "Before moving here, Leslie had no friends. Jess is Leslie's best and only friend." It turned out that Leslie, whom Jess regarded as a savior, had also been saved by Jess. Jess found it hard to accept this fact. In class, Scott maliciously said to Jess, "Now Jess is the fastest runner in the class." Jess turned around and without hesitation punched Scott. The teacher punished Jess to stand in the corridor, but did not criticize him. Having experienced the pain of losing loved ones, she empathized with Jess's actions. The teacher felt regret for losing such an excellent child as Leslie. The music teacher's singing was still melodious and moving, but Jess no longer had the heart to enjoy it. The squirrel monster and the bald eagle were still arrogant, but the troll had already awakened on the school bus. Jess found the bald eagle injured, while Avery sat beside Jess and greeted him. After getting off the bus, Jess could no longer hear Leslie's voice. Jess threw down his backpack and went to the swing, which had already broken. A large tree lay across. Forming a bridge, Jess arrived at the bridgehead and called Leslie's name. He followed the usual path into the forest, to the abandoned car. The wind chimes rang. Jess was no longer afraid, and he directly opened the door, pulled down the wind chimes, and threw them out, freeing the prisoner chained and imprisoned. At this moment, Jess suddenly heard someone calling him. Jess thought it was Leslie returning, and he rushed back recklessly, only to realize it was Aaron quietly following him. Jess went forward and rescued Aaron, who was very worried about his situation, faced with Aaron's concern. Jess was dismissive and even pushed Aaron to the ground. Thus, Jess hurt Aaron's heart. Jess arrived at the fortress belonging to him and Leslie, but unfortunately, Leslie was not there. Jess picked up the paints Leslie had given him and went to the river, squeezing all the paint into the water. Even if Jess could paint the most beautiful picture in the world, without Leslie, everything would lose its meaning. At this moment, the Dark Lord suddenly appeared. Jess quickly stood up and ran for his life. However, the Dark Lord had no intention of letting Jess go. He accidentally tripped over a tree trunk, and the Demon King pounced on him. In fact, the so-called Demon King was just Jess's father. The father picked up Jess and comforted him, saying everything was fine. In his father's arms, Jess finally burst into tears uncontrollably. The accumulated emotions over many days poured out like a flood. Jess believed that if he had invited Leslie to the museum that day, she might not have encountered misfortune. His father gently told Jess that Leslie's death was an accident and had nothing to do with him. Under his father's patient comfort, Jess finally regained his composure. That night, Jess apologized to Aaron for what happened during the day, but Aaron, still angry, did not accept his apology. This moment, Jess saw his portrait on the bedside table. In Aaron's world, Jess was a hero who could eliminate demons for her. The next day, Jess said his final farewell to Leslie in his own way. When he looked at the bridge connecting Terabithia, Jess suddenly had an idea, ran quickly, and in the last moment, begged Leslie's father for the remaining wooden planks of the door. After obtaining Leslie's father's approval, he began a long period of crafting. Time passed little by little. Jess, with his strength and perseverance, finally achieved his goal. He returned home, bringing Aaron's to the bridge before letting Aaron's open her eyes. The invincible shield hung above, and the dangerous bridge now became incredibly safe. It was Leslie who once brought him here. Now Jess will inherit Leslie's spirit and pass this gift to his sister. Jess prepared a flower crown for Aaron's, lovingly placing it on her head. In the next moment, the flower crown on Aaron's head turned into a crown, and the wooden bridge transformed into a fairyland bridge, here holding all the beauty of fantasy. The trolls brought a crown for Jess, and amidst the welcome of countless elves, they truly became the king of Terabithia.